Witnessing a young female worker injured by a metal shard flying past her face from an overloaded sewing machine, the supervisor froze in shock, immediately pressing the stop button and rushing to check on her. As chaos ensued, the factory director burst in with a cold command: restart the machine. If not, he'd be fired for slowing production. The supervisor calmly stepped forward, and what he did next shocked the entire factory. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thoughts. Crack. A sound that didn't belong. A high-pitched whine coming from Station 12, barely audible over the general racket but distinct to someone who'd spent 8 years listening to these machines. Michael's stomach dropped. He knew that sound. Metal stress. Something in the needle assembly was wrong. He started walking faster toward Emily's station. She hadn't noticed. She was too focused on the fabric, trying desperately to keep her speed up, to prove she could handle this. "Emily," he called out, but his voice was lost in the noise. The whine grew sharper. Michael broke into a jog, dodging between workstations. Several workers looked up, sensing something wrong in his urgency. He was 10 feet away when he saw the needle vibrating more than it should. 5 feet away when the metal began to glow from friction. 3 feet away when Emily finally noticed something was wrong and looked down at her machine with wide, confused eyes. And then he heard the crack. Sharp. Final. Like a gunshot in all that industrial noise. The needle snapped. Time seemed to slow down in that impossible way it does when disaster unfolds. Michael saw the broken needle fragment spinning through the air, a tiny piece of metal moving with deadly speed. Emily's face was frozen in that moment of realization that something had gone terribly wrong. Her hand was still on the fabric, her foot still on the pedal. The fragment flew past her face, missing her eye by inches. It could have blinded her. It could have done so much worse. Emily jerked back, her chair scraping against the concrete floor. The machine kept running for another second before the automatic safety kicked in and shut it down. And just like that, the entire production line came to a halt. Not because the machine stopped, they kept humming, keep stitching, keep working. But because every worker in Station 2 had looked up at the sound of that crack. They'd seen Emily stumble back. They'd seen the broken needle housing, still vibrating in the machine. They'd seen how close it had been. Michael reached Emily's side. "Don't move," he said, his voice sharper than he intended. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but her hands were trembling. She hadn't screamed, hadn't cried out. She just sat there, staring at the machine like she couldn't quite process what had almost happened. "Let me see your face," Michael said, gentler now. He tilted her chin toward the overhead lights, checking for any cuts. "Did it hit you?" "No," Emily whispered. It went right past." Michael exhaled slowly. His own hands weren't entirely steady. He looked at the machine, at the broken needle assembly, at the output screen that now showed 0 production. Station 12 was down. Michael stared at the broken needle assembly. The metal was still warm beneath his fingers, the housing vibrating faintly as the machine coasted to a stop. The sharp crack replayed in his head, now that he wasn't fighting the noise of the line anymore. He knew what that sound meant. It wasn't a random failure, it never was. It was what happened when machines were pushed too hard for too long. A few hours earlier, the heat inside Factory 4 had already climbed past 90 degrees. Inside the production area, the air pressed down like a weight. Industrial sewing machines hummed and clacked relentlessly, their motors adding to the heat as the morning wore on. By 9 a.m., the temperature was still climbing, and sweat clung to every movement. The industrial sewing machines hummed and clacked relentlessly, their motors adding more heat to the already stifling air. The smell of fresh fabric and machine oil hung thick throughout the room. This wasn't just any factory in the rundown industrial park of North Carolina. Factory 4 had been renovated from an old textile mill, its brick walls holding decades of history. Now it served the global supply chain, producing apparel for partners across the Atlantic. They were racing against deadlines that had everyone on edge. Michael Santos wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. At 25, he had 8 years on this floor, rising from machine operator to production line supervisor at Station 2. He knew every sound these machines made, every little detail of the production line, and most importantly, he understood the people working alongside him. But knowing the truth didn't ease the pressure. The contract with the Scandinavian countries wasn't just big, it was crucial. Partners from Northern Europe had standards that went far beyond product quality. They inspected labor conditions, safety protocols, and worker treatment. Factory 4 had passed the initial audit, but today a delegation from their strategic partner was due for another inspection. The timing couldn't be worse. They were supposed to finish this batch before the auditors arrived. Show them smooth operations, happy workers, everything under control, but control was slipping away. Richard Brennan, the factory director, had made that clear in the morning briefing a few hours before Emily's incident. "I don't care how you do it. We need maximum speed on every line, every single line." The delegation arrives at 2. "I want this order finished, packed and ready for photos by 1:30. "Understood." Michael had just nodded along with the other supervisors. What else could they do? "Targets come first," Richard added, his eyes scanning the room. "Anyone who can't keep up with targets needs to find work somewhere else." Startled, Michael became aware of someone approaching. He turned to see Richard Brennan striding across the factory floor, his face already red with anger before he'd even reached them. "What the hell happened?" Richard demanded. "Why is Station 12 down?" Michael stood up, positioning himself between Richard and Emily. "Needle assembly failed. We need to—" "I can see it failed." Richard cut him off. "How long to get it back online?" 10 minutes for the repair, but then do it, now." Richard's eyes swept to Emily. "And you, get back to work as soon as he's done." Emily flinched at his tone. "She needs a break," Michael said. The words came out before he'd fully thought them through. "She almost got hit, she's shaken up." Richard turned his full attention to Michael, and the look in his eyes was cold. "I don't care if she's shaken up. I care about meeting our deadline. Fix the machine, get her back to work. That's your job, Santos." The factory floor felt suddenly quiet despite all the noise. Other supervisors had noticed the confrontation. Workers were watching while trying to pretend they weren't. Michael felt the weight of it, his job, his mother's medications, the rent due in 8 days, but he also felt something else. A line he wasn't willing to cross. "Not yet. I'll get the machine fixed," he said carefully. "But I need to redistribute her workload temporarily. Let her settle, then bring her back at half speed while no." Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice to a harsh whisper. "You put her back at full speed or I'll find someone who will. We have 4 hours until that delegation walks through those doors. 4 hours to prove this factory can deliver. I will not let one new worker and one soft supervisor ruin that. Are we clear?" Michael's jaw tightened. "If we push too hard, someone's going to get hurt. If we miss this deadline, 50 people are going to lose their bonuses, including you." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Including her. Think about that while you're being noble." He turned and walked away, leaving Michael standing there with Emily still sitting behind him, the broken machine silent between them. Michael looked down at the needle assembly. The metal was still warm. He could fix this in 10 minutes. Get it running. Push Emily back to work. Keep his job. Keep everything stable. But stability built on fear had a way of collapsing when you least expected it. He pulled out his radio and called for a maintenance tech. While he waited, he noticed Station 14 again. That motor was running even hotter now, the housing temperature definitely climbing into the danger zone. 2 problems, both manageable if he just followed orders, or both potentially catastrophic if something went wrong. Michael made a decision then, standing in the heat and the noise with the weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on him. It wasn't the decision Richard wanted. It probably wasn't even the smart decision. The smell of machine oil and overheated metal pulled him back into the moment. Emily was still sitting there, her chair slightly crooked, her hands clenched in her lap. The production line hadn't fully stopped. Motors hummed, belts kept moving, but nearby workers had gone quiet, watching. Michael exhaled slowly and lifted his radio. "Maintenance to Station 12, he said. The machine was still down, and this time it would stay that way until it was safe to run. The maintenance tech arrived within minutes, a wiry man named Carlos, who'd been keeping these machines running for longer than Michael had been alive. He took one look at the broken needle assembly and whistled low. "This wasn't just wear and tear," Carlos said, pulling out his tools. "See these stress marks? This machine's been running too hot for too long." The metal fatigued. Michael nodded, his suspicion confirmed. "How long to fix it?" 10 minutes for a patch job. 20 if you want it done right. Do it right." Carlos raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. He started disassembling the needle housing while Michael turned his attention to the larger problem. Station 12 would be down for at least 20 minutes. That put them behind schedule. But more than that, Emily couldn't go back to full speed even after the repair, not safely. Michael did the mental math. If he could redistribute her workload across the other stations, they might be able to maintain overall production. It would mean asking the experienced workers to push a little harder, but not dangerously so. They had the skill. Emily didn't, not yet. He started making rounds, stopping at each station in his line. "Hey Maria," he said to the woman at Station 9, a veteran of 12 years who could sew in her sleep. "I need a favor." Maria looked up from her work, her hands never stopping their fluid motion. "Station 12's down." "Yeah, I'm going to need you to take on about 15% more for the next few hours. Can you handle that?" She studied his face for a moment, then glanced over at where Emily sat, still pale and quiet. "The new girl, okay, she will be. But I can't put her back at full speed right away." Maria nodded slowly. "Richard know about this, he will." Something shifted in Maria's expression. A small smile quickly hidden. "Then yeah, I can handle 15% more. But if we make quota, you better make sure me and the others get something for the extra work." "I will." Michael moved to the next station, then the next, having the same conversation. Most of the workers agreed without much fuss. They'd all been new once. They understood, but agreeing meant something else too. It meant they trusted Michael to protect them from Richard's anger when he found out. By the time Carlos finished the repair, Michael had restructured the entire line's workflow. It wasn't perfect, but it would work. They'd hit their numbers, just not the way Richard wanted. Michael returned to Station 12 where Emily still sat, her hands clasped in her lap. "Machine's fixed," he said gently, "but I'm not putting you back on it right away." Emily looked up at him, confusion and relief warring in her expression. "But Mr. Brennan said." "I know what he said, but you almost got seriously hurt. You need a few minutes to settle." He paused, then added, "And when you do go back, you're running at reduced speed. Just for today. Won't that mess up the production numbers? I've redistributed the load. We'll hit our target." Emily bit her lip. "The others, they're doing extra work because of me. They're doing extra work because that's what teammates do." Michael crouched down so he was at eye level with her. "Listen to me. That needle broke because someone pushed this machine too hard for too long. That's not your fault. You didn't cause this. But I'm slow. I know I am. I'm trying to keep up, but you're 3 weeks in. You're not supposed to be as fast as people who've been here for years." He kept his voice low, aware that others were listening even while they worked. "What happened today is a reminder that speed isn't worth someone getting hurt." "Okay," Emily nodded, but there were tears in her eyes now. Not from pain, from the overwhelming pressure of it all. Michael stood up. "Take 15 minutes, get some water, breathe, then we'll ease you back in." He started to walk away when Emily spoke again. "Mr. Santos, thank you." He just nodded and kept moving. There would be time for gratitude later. Right now he needed to check on Station 14. The motor housing was definitely too hot. Michael could feel the heat radiating off it from 3 feet away. The worker there, a quiet man named Dimitri, seemed unaware or unconcerned. "Dimitri, when's the last time this motor was serviced?" Dimitri shrugged without looking up. "Don't know. 2 months maybe." 2 months in a facility running maximum output was too long. Michael made a note on his clipboard to schedule maintenance, then hesitated. The motor was hot now. Not critical, not yet, but trending that direction. He could flag it for tomorrow's maintenance schedule. They'd service it tonight after the shift ended. Keep production running today, fix it later. Or he could shut it down now. Call Carlos back. Lose another 30 minutes of production time. Michael stood there, feeling the heat from the motor, hearing Richard's voice in his head. "Target comes first." He looked at the clock on the wall. 11:45. They had 2 hours and 15 minutes until the delegation arrived. With his redistributed workflow and if nothing else went wrong, they'd just barely make it. If he shut down Station 42, they wouldn't. Michael made his decision. He'd watch the motor closely, check it every 15 minutes. At the first sign of real danger, he'd shut it down. But for now, it could run. He was walking back toward his supervisor's station when he heard Richard's voice boom across the factory floor. "Santos, my office, now." Every worker in Station 2 flinched at the sound. Michael squared his shoulders and headed for the cramped glass-walled office at the edge of the production floor. Richard was waiting inside, his face flushed with anger. He slammed the door behind Michael hard enough to rattle the glass. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Richard didn't sit down, didn't invite Michael to sit. He just stood there radiating fury. "I'm managing my line," Michael said evenly. "Managing? You call redistributing workloads without authorization managing?" Richard grabbed a clipboard off his desk. "I've got 4 workers now doing 15% more work than their assigned quota. Do you know what that does to our efficiency metrics? It maintains our overall production while I don't care about your excuses." Richard threw the clipboard down. "I gave you a direct order. Put the new girl back on her machine at full speed. You deliberately disobeyed me." Michael felt his own anger rising but kept his voice controlled. That machine failed because it was pushed too hard. Emily was operating it at speeds she wasn't ready for. I made a judgment call to prevent another accident. Your job isn't to make judgment calls. Your job is to follow orders and hit your numbers. My job is to supervise this line safely. Safely? Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about safety? Let me tell you about safety. 50 workers in this factory depend on the bonuses from this contract. Your mother depends on your paycheck. That's what's at stake here. Not your feelings. Not your precious conscience. Results." The mention of his mother hit like a physical blow. Michael's hands clenched at his sides. "You can't use my family to I'm not using anything. I'm stating facts." Richard leaned against his desk, his tone shifting to something almost reasonable. "Look, Michael, I know you're trying to do the right thing. But the right thing in this business is keeping this factory profitable. These Northern European clients, they're tough. They demand perfection. If we don't deliver, they'll take their contract somewhere else. To China, to Vietnam, somewhere their money goes further. I understand the pressure, but do you? Because from where I'm standing, you just cost us 30 minutes of production to coddle a worker who should never have been hired in the first place." Richard picked up his clipboard again. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back out there and put Emily back on Station 12 at full speed. The other workers will return to their standard quotas, and we will hit our target before that delegation arrives. Clear?" Michael met his eyes. "And if I don't, then you're fired. Effective immediately." Richard said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "I'll promote Jessica from Station 1 to supervise your line. She'll do what needs to be done." The threat hung in the air between them. Michael thought about his mother, about the rent, about everything he'd lose. But he also thought about Emily's face when that needle had snapped. The way her hands had trembled. The pale shock in her eyes. "I can't do that," Michael said quietly. Richard straightened up, genuine surprise crossing his features. "Excuse me, I can't put her back at full speed. Not today. It's not safe. Not safe. She wasn't hurt. She almost was. And pushing her harder isn't going to change that. It'll just increase the chances of it happening again." Michael took a breath. "I've redistributed the workload. We'll still hit the target. We'll do it safely. You'll do it the way I tell you to do it, or you'll do it somewhere else." Richard's face was red again. "Do you think you're special, Santos? You think this place can't run without you?" "No, but I think it shouldn't run by putting people in danger." "Danger? You want to talk about danger?" Richard moved around his desk, getting in Michael's space. "The danger is 50 people losing their jobs because this factory loses a major contract. That's real danger. That's families going hungry. Not your hypothetical maybe possibly someone might get hurt nonsense." Michael didn't back down. "Workers aren't machines, they're people, and people deserve to be safe while they work." Beautiful speech, really touching. Richard's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Here's my speech. You have 2 choices. Do what I told you or clear out your locker. What's it going to be?" The moment stretched out. Through the glass wall Michael could see the production floor. Emily was back at her station now, Carlos having given her the go-ahead. She was working slowly, carefully, exactly as Michael had instructed. The other workers in his line were handling their increased load without complaint. They were trusting him, and he couldn't betray that trust, not even to save his job. "I guess I'm clearing out my locker," Michael said. Richard blinked. "What? You heard me. I'm not putting that girl in danger. I'm not pushing those machines past safe limits. If that costs me my job, so be it." For a moment Richard looked genuinely shocked. Then his expression hardened into something ugly. "Fine. You want to be a martyr? Be my guest. But don't think this ends here." "What's that supposed to mean?" Richard smiled, and it was cold. "It means that if this line hits target today, and you all get your bonuses, every cent from you and your precious Emily comes to me. Consider it the price for your insubordination." Michael's jaw dropped. "You can't do that." "Can't I? You deliberately disrupted my production plan. You cost us time and efficiency. Call it an administrative fee." Richard crossed his arms. "Or you could just do what I told you in the first place. Put her back at full speed. Then we all get our bonuses like normal. Your choice." It was extortion, plain and simple. And the worst part was, Richard probably could do it. As factory director he had discretion over bonus distributions. He could justify taking their shares as a penalty for the disruption. Michael felt the anger surge up again, hot and sharp. That money is their earnings. They worked for it. Then they can keep it. All you have to do is put Emily back on that machine at full speed. Richard checked his watch. "You've got until I count to 10 to decide." 1, 2. Michael's mind raced. If he refused he'd be fired anyway, and Richard would take the bonuses out of spite. Emily and all the workers who'd helped would lose money because of him. His mother would ask why he came home early, and he'd have to explain that he'd thrown away their only income for a principal. But if he agreed, Emily would be back on that machine, working at speeds she couldn't handle, on equipment that had already failed once today. 6, 7. Someone could get seriously hurt. 8, 9. But his mother needed her medication. The rent was due. 10. Michael looked Richard in the eye and said the words that would change everything. "No." Richard's smile vanished. "What? No, I won't do it. Fire me if you want. Take the bonuses. Do whatever you think you have to do." Michael's voice was steady now, past the fear, past the doubt. "But I will not put that woman in danger just to make your numbers look good. You arrogant little." Richard started forward, his fists clenched. The office door burst open. A woman stepped inside, and both men froze. She was young, maybe 30, dressed in business casual clothes that looked expensive but practical. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She had the kind of face that could be anywhere from 25 to 40, and eyes that missed nothing. "Gentlemen," she said calmly, as if she hadn't just walked in on a confrontation. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Richard's expression transformed in an instant. The rage vanished, replaced by a professional smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Of course not. You're early. The delegation wasn't scheduled until 2 o'clock. I like to see things as they actually are," the woman said. Her accent was slight but noticeable. Scandinavian, Michael thought. Swedish, maybe. Not how they're prepared to be seen. She looked past Richard to Michael, and something in her gaze made him straighten unconsciously. It was like being studied under a microscope. "This is Michael Santos," Richard said, his tone now ingratiating. "One of our line supervisors." "Michael, this is Ingrid Larsson," the woman interrupted. "Strategic Partnership Coordinator for Nordic Trade Solutions." She extended her hand to Michael. Her grip was firm, professional, but her eyes kept studying him with that unsettling intensity. "A pleasure," Michael managed. "We had a small incident earlier," Richard said quickly. "Just a routine mechanical failure. Already resolved. Production hasn't missed a beat." Ingrid's gaze shifted to him. "A mechanical failure. Nothing serious. These things happen in any manufacturing environment." Richard was already moving toward the door, clearly trying to steer her away. "Why don't I show you the quality control area first? We've made some recent upgrades that I think you'll actually," Ingrid said, not moving. "I'd like to hear more about this incident." From Mr. Santos. She turned back to Michael. You were involved? Michael glanced at Richard, who was practically radiating warning signals. This was it. The moment where he could nod, downplay everything, let Richard guide the narrative. Or he could tell the truth. Yes, Michael said. One of our needle assemblies failed on Station 12. The needle broke and the fragment came very close to hitting the operator's face. Ingrid's expression didn't change, but something sharpened in her eyes. Close. How close? Inches, maybe less. And the operator? Were they injured? No, but it was close. I see. Ingrid pulled out a small tablet from her bag. And what actions did you take following this incident? Richard jumped in before Michael could answer. Standard protocol. Machine was repaired immediately. Operator assessed. Production resumed. Everything by the book. I didn't ask you, Ingrid said without looking at Richard. Her eyes stayed on Michael. I asked Mr. Santos. Michael could feel Richard's glare burning into the side of his head. Every instinct told him to defer, to let Richard handle this. But something about Ingrid's directness, her refusal to be managed, made him want to be equally direct. I redistributed the operator's workload temporarily, he said. The machine failed because it was running too hot for too long. I wanted to make sure the same thing didn't happen again. A sensible precaution. Mr. Brennan disagreed. He wanted the operator back on the machine at full speed immediately. The words were out before Michael could stop them. Richard made a strangled sound. Ingrid looked at Richard. Is this true? It's a mischaracterization, Richard said tightly. We have production targets to meet, targets that your company agreed to. Mr. Santos was being overly cautious at the expense of our deadline. Overly cautious. Ingrid repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them. Interesting phrase. She made a note on her tablet. And where is this operator now? Station 12, Michael said. Working at reduced speed until I'm confident. Until we're confident, Richard corrected sharply, that the machine is operating within normal parameters. Ingrid nodded slowly. I'd like to see Station 12, and speak with this operator. Richard's smile became strained. Of course, though I should mention we're on a tight schedule today, and then we shouldn't waste time. Ingrid headed for the door, clearly expecting them to follow. Richard shot Michael a look that promised retribution later, then plastered his professional smile back on and hurried after Ingrid. Michael followed, his heart pounding. He'd just thrown gasoline on a fire. Whatever consequences Richard had threatened before, they'd just gotten worse. But he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The three of them emerged onto the production floor. The noise hit them immediately, that constant mechanical thunder that Michael barely noticed anymore. Ingrid, however, paused, her eyes sweeping across the rows of workers hunched over their machines. How long has it been this hot in here? She asked. Richard waved a hand dismissively. It's summer in North Carolina. We keep it as cool as we can, but these machines generate heat. It's unavoidable. Ingrid made another note. They crossed the floor to Station 2, and Michael saw heads turn as workers noticed the stranger. Word would spread fast that someone important was here. Emily was at Station 12, her hands moving carefully over a garment. She'd settled into the rhythm now, working at the pace Michael had set. When she saw them approaching, especially Ingrid, her eyes widened slightly. This is Emily. Richard trailed off, clearly having forgotten her last name. Anderson, Michael supplied. Right, Emily Anderson, one of our newer operators. Richard's tone suggested this explained everything. Emily, this is Miss Larson from Nordic Trade Solutions. She'd like to ask you a few questions about the incident earlier. Emily looked terrified, her hands stilled on the fabric. Ingrid smiled, and it was warm, genuine in a way Richard's never were. Don't be nervous. I just want to understand what happened. Can you tell me about the needle that broke? Emily glanced at Richard, then at Michael. The machine was making a weird sound. I didn't know what it meant. Then the needle it snapped. It flew past my face. She touched her cheek unconsciously. I thought it was going to hit my eye, but it didn't. No, but it was really close. And afterward, what did Mr. Santos do? He stopped the machine, asked if I was hurt. Then Emily hesitated. Go on, Ingrid encouraged. He told me to take a break, said he'd redistribute my work so I could run at slower speed for a while, to settle my nerves. Did Mr. Brennan agree with this decision? Emily's eyes went to Richard, and Michael saw real fear there. I don't, it's all right, Ingrid said gently. I'm not trying to get anyone in trouble. I just need to understand the situation. Emily took a breath. Mr. Brennan wanted me back on the machine right away, at full speed, but Mr. Santos said no. I see. Ingrid typed something on her tablet. And how do you feel about that? Feel about Mr. Santos's decision to slow your workload? Emily looked at Michael, and there was something like gratitude in her expression. I think he might have saved me from making a mistake. I was really shaken up. If he'd pushed me to go fast right away, I probably would have messed up, maybe hurt myself for real. Ingrid nodded slowly. She examined the machine, checked the recently replaced needle assembly, ran her fingers along the housing that Carlos had repaired. Then she straightened up, and turned to Richard. How many incidents have you had this quarter? Richard's smile flickered. Incidents, equipment failures, near misses, anything that could have resulted in worker injury. This is manufacturing. There are always minor. How many? Richard's jaw tightened. I'd have to check the exact numbers. Please do that. I'll wait. It wasn't a request. Richard's face flushed, but he pulled out his phone and started making calls. While he did, Ingrid walked slowly down the line of machines in Station 2, watching the workers, observing the equipment. Michael stayed with Emily, aware that they were in the eye of a storm that hadn't finished yet. After several minutes of increasingly tense phone calls, Richard returned. 17 equipment failures this quarter, none resulting in serious injury. 17. Ingrid's expression didn't change. And how many resulted in near misses, like today? The data doesn't estimate. Richard's hands clenched. Maybe 4 or 5. So approximately 5 incidents where workers nearly got hurt, and your response was to immediately resume full production. Ingrid's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. That's concerning. With all due respect, Miss Larson, we're meeting every production target in our contract. Our quality ratings are excellent. A few minor safety incidents are just part of the business. Minor. Ingrid looked at Emily. Would you call this minor? Emily shook her head. Ingrid turned back to Richard. Nordic Trade Solutions has very specific standards for our manufacturing partners, not just in quality, but in worker welfare and safety. These standards aren't suggestions, they're requirements, and we meet those requirements. Richard insisted. Do you? Ingrid glanced at her tablet. Because what I'm seeing suggests a pattern of prioritizing production targets over worker safety. That's not acceptable to us. Richard's professional mask was slipping. Are you suggesting we're in breach of contract? I'm suggesting that this bears further investigation. Ingrid looked at Michael. Mr. Santos, how long have you been a line supervisor? 3 years. And in those 3 years, how many times have you refused a direct order from Mr. Brennan? The question caught him off guard. This was the first. Why today? Michael chose his words carefully. Because today was the first time I believed following an order would put someone in immediate danger, even though it might cost you your job. He nodded. Yes. Ingrid studied him for a long moment, then made another note. Mr. Brennan, I think we need to have a more detailed conversation. In private. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Not with a major client. Of course. My office. That will be fine. Ingrid turned to Michael. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Santos. Please continue your work as you see fit. As they walked away, Emily looked up at Michael with wide eyes. Did I just get you in more trouble? No, Michael said, though he wasn't sure that was true. You did fine. He watched Richard and Ingrid disappear into the glass office, and through the window he could see Richard gesticulating, clearly trying to explain or defend or justify. But Ingrid's face remained neutral, unreadable. Michael returned to monitoring his line, checking each station, watching the numbers. They were still on track to hit their target, despite everything. The workers had stepped up, exactly as he'd hoped, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in the last hour. And he had no idea if it was for better or worse. 20 minutes later, Ingrid emerged from Richard's office alone. She crossed the factory floor with purposeful strides, heading straight for Michael. Mr. Santos, may I speak with you privately? Michael's stomach tightened, but he nodded. They moved to a quiet corner of the floor, away from the machine noise. Ingrid didn't waste time. Mr. Brennan has just informed me that he's terminating your employment effective immediately. The words hit like a punch. Michael had expected it, had even accepted it, but hearing it spoken aloud made it suddenly, painfully real. I understand, he managed. Do you? Ingrid tilted her head. Because I don't. Help me understand why he's firing one of his supervisors in the middle of a critical production deadline. Michael hesitated. This was it. The moment where he could probably save his job by backing down, apologizing, saying he'd overreacted. But the image of that broken needle flying past Emily's face was still too fresh. Because I refused to put a worker in danger, he said simply. Mr. Brennan's explanation was different. He said you undermined his authority and disrupted production. That's true too. Ingrid smiled slightly. At least you're honest. But you didn't answer my question. Why did you refuse? Michael looked out at the production floor, at the 50 people working at their stations. Because workers aren't machines, they're people, and people deserve to go home safe at the end of their shift. That's more important than any production target. Even if it costs you your job. Yes. Even if it means your mother can't afford her medication. Mr. Brennan mentioned your situation. Michael's jaw tightened. Of course Richard had used that. Yes. Even then, Ingrid was quiet for a moment, studying him with those sharp analytical eyes. You know what I do, Mr. Santos, my job at Nordic Trade Solutions. You coordinate partnerships, that's part of it. But mainly, I find manufacturing partners who align with our values. Companies we can trust not just to make good products, but to treat their workers well. Do you know how rare that is? Michael didn't know how to answer. In the past 6 months, I've audited 43 factories across 7 countries. Do you know how many supervisors I've met who would refuse a direct order to protect a worker, even one who'd been on the job for only 3 weeks? How many? Including you. 1. Michael blinked. I'm not sure what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. I want to make you an offer. Ingrid glanced back toward Richard's office. But first there's something you should know. Something Mr. Brennan doesn't know yet. What? I'm not just a partnership coordinator, Mr. Santos. I'm the daughter of the man who owns Nordic Trade Solutions. She pulled out a business card and handed it. The name on it read, Ingrid Larsson, Executive Vice President, Nordic Trade Solutions. Michael's mind went blank. You're the person Mr. Brennan just tried to bullshit for the past 20 minutes. Ingrid's smile was sharp now. He told me this factory runs perfectly, that safety is his top priority, that today's incident was an isolated anomaly. It's not. I know. I've been reviewing your incident reports. I've been watching how your workers react when Mr. Brennan walks past. I've been seeing the fear. Her expression hardened. But mostly, I've been thinking about what I saw earlier. A supervisor willing to lose his job to protect a worker, and a factory director willing to fire that supervisor to hit a deadline. What are you saying? I'm saying Nordic Trade Solutions can't continue our partnership with a factory that treats workers this way. My father built this company on ethical sourcing. We don't compromise on that. Michael felt a chill. You're canceling the contract. Unless things change. Immediately, Ingrid looked him in the eye. I want you to be the new factory director, Mr. Santos. For a moment Michael was sure he'd misheard. What? I've spoken with the ownership group that runs this facility. They've agreed to Mr. Brennan's immediate termination and your promotion, effective today. But I'm just a line supervisor. I don't have the experience to. You have something more important than experience. You have integrity. You put people first. Ingrid's voice softened slightly. Look, I'm not saying it'll be easy. You'll have to learn fast. But I've seen enough to know you're the kind of person who can make this place what it should be. Michael's head was spinning. I can't, or won't, Ingrid challenged. Because here's the situation. If you say no, I walk away, and Nordic Trade Solutions cancels this contract. This factory loses its biggest client. Those 50 workers you wanted to protect, they lose their jobs, including Emily. The manipulation was obvious, but that didn't make it less effective. If you say yes, Ingrid continued,
You get the chance to actually change things here, make it safer, better, run it the way you know it should be run, and Richard will be gone within the hour. The ownership group is already drafting his termination papers.
Michael looked out at the factory floor again, at Emily working carefully at her reduced speed, at Maria and Dmitri and all the others, at Station 14 with its overheating motor that he'd been watching all day. I need to make a condition, he heard himself say. Ingrid raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to make conditions. If I'm going to be director, I am. Michael met her gaze. Station 14's motor is running hot. It needs to be shut down and serviced immediately. And I want a full safety audit of every machine in this factory before we resume maximum production. That will delay your shipment, then we'll be delayed, but I won't run this place the way Richard did. Ingrid smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Good, those are exactly the kinds of conditions I want to hear. She extended her hand. Do we have a deal? Michael hesitated one more moment, thinking about his mother, about the responsibility, about everything that could go wrong. Then he shook her hand. We have a deal. The next 30 minutes passed in a blur. The ownership group arrived, 3 men in suits who looked uncomfortable on the factory floor. They spoke with Ingrid, then with Richard in hushed, tense conversations in the glass office. Through the windows, Michael watched Richard's face go from confused to angry to pale. Then Richard emerged, escorted by building security. He didn't look at anyone as he left, didn't say goodbye, just walked out carrying a small box of personal items, his face set in rigid fury. The workers noticed. Whispers spread across the floor, even over the machine noise. Michael was summoned to the office where the ownership group waited with Ingrid. Mr. Santos, said the oldest of the three, a silver-haired man who introduced himself as James Hartley. Miss Larson has explained the situation. We're prepared to offer you the factory director position, pending your agreement to certain terms. They outlined the terms. Salary increase, responsibility for all production lines, not just Station 2, direct oversight of safety protocols, quarterly reviews. Michael listened, still feeling like he was in a dream. There's one more thing, Ingrid said. She looked at the ownership group. I want Mr. Santos to have full authority to implement any safety measures he deems necessary, even if they impact short-term production targets. Hartley frowned. Within reason certainly, but not within reason. Full authority. Ingrid's voice was firm. If Nordic Trade Solutions is going to continue our partnership, we need to know this facility prioritizes worker safety. That means giving Mr. Santos the power to make those decisions without worrying about being overruled. The 3 men exchanged glances. Finally, Hartley nodded. Agreed. They drew up a quick contract. Michael signed it with a hand that shook slightly. Just like that, he was the factory director. I'll leave you to inform the staff, Hartley said. We'll announce it through official channels tomorrow, but the workforce should hear it from you first. After they left, Ingrid remained. You look overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed. Good. That means you understand the responsibility. She checked her watch. You've got 2 hours until our delegation arrives for the official inspection. What's your first priority? Michael thought about it. Station 14. I'm shutting it down for maintenance, and I need to talk to my workers. Then I'll let you get to it. Ingrid headed for the door, then paused. Michael, you made the right choice today. Don't doubt that. After she left, Michael stood alone in the office that had been Richard's and was now his. The factory floor sprawled out before him through the glass wall, all those machines and all those people now his responsibility. He took a deep breath, then grabbed a radio and stepped out onto the floor. Attention all stations, he said into the radio. This is Michael Santos. Please power down your machines. We're having a brief meeting. Right now. The confusion was immediate. Machines didn't stop mid-shift. Not ever, but slowly one by one the workers complied. The noise died down to an eerie quiet. 50 faces turned toward him. Michael climbed onto a workbench so everyone could see him. His heart hammered in his chest. I know you've all noticed what happened today, he began. Richard Brennan is no longer with this company. As of 10 minutes ago, I'm the new factory director. Stunned silence. Then a ripple of whispers. I know this is sudden. I know some of you are worried about what this means, so I'm going to be straight with you. Michael looked out at the sea of faces. We're not hitting our deadline today. More whispers, louder now. Worried voices. We're not hitting it because I'm shutting down Station 14 for emergency maintenance, and because I've ordered a full safety audit of every machine in this facility. That audit starts tomorrow, and it's going to slow us down." Someone called out, "What about the Scandinavian contract? Nordic Trade Solutions is still our partner, but they're our partner because they care about how we treat you." Miss Larson made it clear that they want quality products made by workers who are safe and respected, not products made by people too scared to report problems. Maria raised her hand. "What about our bonuses? Here's what I can promise you. If we make our targets, you get your full bonuses. All of you. No penalties, no cuts, no director taking a share that isn't his." Michael looked directly at Emily, "And that includes our newest workers." Emily's eyes widened. "But I need you to understand something. I will never ask you to risk your safety to hit a number. Never. If a machine is acting strange, you report it. If you're feeling unsafe, you speak up. And if I ever tell you to do something you think might hurt someone, I want you to refuse, just like I did today." He could see the doubt on some faces. This was different from anything Richard had ever said. "I know Richard ran things a certain way. I know some of you learned to keep your heads down and just do what you were told. I'm telling you now that ends today. This factory works because of you. Your skill, your experience, your dedication. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be safe." Dmitri spoke up from Station 14. "Are you really shutting down my machine?" "Yes. Within the next 10 minutes, Carlos will do a full maintenance check. If it's fine, you'll be back up in an hour. If it's not, better we found out now than after it failed and hurt you." Dmitri nodded slowly. "Okay then." Michael took a breath. "I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. I'm 25 years old and I was a line supervisor yesterday. I'm going to make mistakes. But I promise you this, I will always put your safety first. I will always listen when you speak up. And I will never ask you to choose between your job and your conscience." The factory floor was quiet. Then from the back someone started clapping. It was Maria. Slowly others joined in. Not everyone. Some still looked skeptical. But enough. Enough to make Michael's throat tight. "All right," he said, his voice rough. "Let's get back to work. Safely." The machines powered back up. The noise returned, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. Michael could feel it. He climbed down from the workbench and immediately went to Station 14. "Dmitri, power down. Carlos is on his way." As he waited for the maintenance tech, Emily approached him. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "Mr. Santos, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "I'm not just a factory worker." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" "My last name isn't Anderson, it's Larson." The world tilted. Michael stared at her. "You're Ingrid's younger sister, the owner's daughter." Emily's words came out in a rush. "My father wanted me to understand the business from the ground up, to see what it's really like for workers, so he sent me here under a fake name. Nobody was supposed to know." Michael's mind reeled. "You've been here for 3 weeks. You've been working on my line. I saw everything," Emily said quietly. "The way Richard pushed everyone. The way he threatened you. The way you stood up for me, even though you thought I was just some new girl who couldn't keep up." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You were willing to lose everything to protect me, not because of who my father is. You didn't even know. You did it because it was right." I don't understand." "Ingrid didn't come early by accident. I called her. After the needle broke, I texted her and told her she needed to get here immediately, to see what was really happening." Emily wiped her eyes. "I'm sorry I deceived you, but I needed to know what this place was really like. And now I do." Michael didn't know what to say. The woman he'd been protecting was the daughter of the company owner. The contract they'd been rushing to complete was for her father's business. "So this whole thing," he said slowly, "was a test." "No, it wasn't a test. I really am learning the business. I really did almost get hurt." Emily's voice shook. "And you really did save me, not because you had to, but because you believed it was right. That's real. That matters." Carlos arrived before Michael could respond, toolbox in hand. "You wanted me to check Station 14. "Yeah." Michael forced himself to focus. "Full diagnostic. I want to know if it's safe." As Carlos got to work, Michael turned back to Emily. "No Larson," but she'd already walked away, heading back to her station. or rather back to the station where she'd been working undercover. Michael's head spun. Everything he thought he knew about today had just shifted. The struggling new worker was actually the daughter of a business magnate. The routine inspection had been called in specifically because Emily had witnessed Richard's behavior, and his decision to protect her, his refusal to back down, had all been watched and evaluated by people with far more power than he'd imagined. He should feel manipulated, used, but instead he felt something else. Relief, because his choice had been real. Emily's danger had been real, and he'd made the right call for the right reasons regardless of who was watching. Carlos emerged from under Station 14's housing. You were right to shut it down. The motor's got a cracked bearing. Another hour and it would have seized completely. Could have started a fire. How long to fix it? I don't have the part here. Need to order it. 2 days minimum. Do it. Michael made a note on his clipboard. And Carlos, I want you to check every motor in this facility. Same priority as active production. If something's wrong, I want to know immediately. Carlos grinned. Now that's what I like to hear. Richard never wanted to spend money on preventive maintenance. Yeah, well, Richard's gone. New management, new rules. As Carlos headed off to begin his inspections, Michael looked at the clock. 1:15. The delegation would be here in 45 minutes. They wouldn't have the shipment ready. They wouldn't have the production numbers Richard had promised. But they would have something better. They would have a factory that was starting to prioritize the right things. Michael grabbed his radio again. All station supervisors, meet me in the conference room in 5 minutes. We need to talk about what we're going to show this delegation. As he headed for the conference room, he passed Emily's station. She looked up, and their eyes met. She mouthed 2 words, thank you. Michael nodded and kept walking. He had a factory to run. And for the first time in 8 years he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was ready for it. The delegation from Nordic Trade Solutions arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. There were 5 of them, including Ingrid and Emily's father, a tall, distinguished man in his late 50s who introduced himself simply as Henrik Larsson. Michael met them at the entrance, acutely aware of how underdressed he was in his factory floor clothes compared to their business attire. Mr. Santos, Henrik said, his accent thicker than his daughter's. Ingrid tells me we have much to discuss. Yes, sir, but first I should be honest about our production status. We're behind schedule. Henrik raised an eyebrow. Oh, I shut down one of our production lines for emergency maintenance, and I've ordered comprehensive safety audits of all equipment. That's delayed our shipment by approximately 36 hours. There was a moment of silence. Then Henrik smiled. Good. Michael blinked. Sir, my daughter has spent the last 3 weeks working in your factory. She's told me many things about how it was run. Most of them troubled me greatly. Henrik's expression grew serious. The fact that your first act as director was to prioritize safety over deadlines tells me Ingrid chose well. I still plan to complete your order, just not at the cost of I know. Henrik placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Take the time you need. My company is built on ethical practices. We will not be the reason workers are placed in danger. The tour that followed was different from any inspection Michael had seen before. They didn't just look at products, they talked to workers, asking about conditions, safety, how they felt about the recent changes. Michael watched Henrik speak with Maria, with Dmitri, with a dozen others. He watched Ingrid examining equipment, taking notes, nodding approval when she saw the maintenance tags. Carlos had started placing on each inspected machine, and he watched Emily, still in her factory worker clothes, reunite with her father. The hug was long and tight, and when Henrik finally released her there were tears in his eyes. You scared me, Henrik said quietly to his daughter. That text about the needle. I'm okay, Dad. Michael made sure of that. Henrik looked over at Michael, and there was something in his gaze that made Michael stand a little straighter. Yes, I'm beginning to understand that. After 2 hours, the delegation gathered in the conference room with Michael and his newly appointed supervisors. I've seen enough, Henrik announced. Nordic Trade Solutions will continue our partnership with this facility. Moreover, we're going to increase our order volume by 30%, effective next quarter. Michael's jaw dropped. Sir? You've proven this factory can prioritize what matters. That's increasingly rare in our industry. Henrik leaned forward. But I have conditions. Of course. First, every worker in this facility receives a 15% wage increase, effective immediately. Second, you'll implement a comprehensive safety training program. We'll cover the costs. Third, any worker who reports a safety concern receives protected status. No retaliation ever. Michael's mind raced, calculating costs and logistics. Those are significant changes. Can you implement them? Yes, but I'll need time to. You'll have it. Ingrid will work with you directly. She'll be your liaison with our company. Henrik glanced at his older daughter, who nodded. And Emily will continue her training here for another 3 months, if she still wants to, after what she's experienced. Emily spoke up. I do, but not undercover this time. I want to learn properly, with everyone knowing who I am. Fair enough. Henrik stood, extending his hand to Michael. Welcome to our partnership, Mr. Santos. I think this is the beginning of something good. As they shook hands, Michael allowed himself to feel the weight of what had just happened. In the span of 6 hours, he'd gone from line supervisor to factory director. He'd stood up to bullying, protected a worker, been fired, and been rehired into a position he'd never imagined holding. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked out. After the delegation left, Michael stood alone on the factory floor. The machines hummed their endless song. The workers moved through their tasks with practiced efficiency, but the fear was gone. He could sense it in the way people carried themselves, in the questions they asked instead of staying silent, in the small ways they'd already started to trust him. It was a start, just a start, but it was enough. The first week as factory director nearly broke Michael. Intellectually, he'd understood that management was different from supervision. But understanding and experiencing were two very different things. As a line supervisor, he'd been responsible for 15 machines and the workers who operated them. He'd known every quirk of those machines, every strength and weakness of those workers. He'd been part of the team, working alongside them. As factory director, he was responsible for everything: 5 production lines, 50 machines, 70 workers across 3 shifts, supply chain logistics, quality control, budget management, client relations. It was overwhelming. The second day, he made his first major mistake. He'd been reviewing production schedules when he noticed line 3 was running below capacity. Without thinking, he moved 6 workers from line 5 to compensate. It seemed logical: redistribute resources to maximize efficiency. Within an hour, he realized his error. Line 5 had been running ahead precisely because those workers were his most experienced team. Moving them left line 5 understaffed with less skilled operators. And line 3's slowdown hadn't been a people problem. It was an equipment issue. 3 of their machines needed recalibration. The result was both lines falling behind schedule. Michael stared at the production reports, feeling his stomach sink. This was exactly the kind of inefficiency Richard had never tolerated. The kind of mistake that cost money and time. He called an emergency meeting with his line supervisors. I messed up, he said without preamble. The line 3 issue wasn't staffing. I should have checked equipment first, before moving people around. Jessica, the line 1 supervisor Richard would have promoted, raised an eyebrow. You're admitting you made a mistake? Yes, because I did. Michael looked at each of them. I need you to tell me when I'm about to do something stupid. I'm learning this job as I go, and I'm going to make more mistakes. I need you to speak up. There was a moment of silence. Then Roberto, the line 4 supervisor, spoke. Richard used to fire people who questioned him. I'm not Richard. No, Jessica said slowly. You're really not. They spent the next hour troubleshooting the situation. Jessica suggested recalibrating line 3's machines immediately. Roberto offered to lend 2 of his workers to line 5 temporarily to stabilize their output. Maria, who'd been promoted to line 2 supervisor, recommended a rotating schedule that would cross-train workers and prevent bottlenecks. By the end of the meeting they had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. Thank you, Michael said. All of you. I can't do this without you. As they filed out, Jessica lingered. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you really turn down Richard, when he gave you the choice? Michael thought about how to answer. Because some lines you don't cross. Not for money, not for security, not for anything. If I'd put Emily back on that machine, I'd have been the kind of person who cares more about targets than people, and I couldn't live with being that person.
Jessica nodded slowly. Richard offered me your job, you know. If he fired you, said I was a team player who understood priorities. I didn't know that. I turned him down. Told him if that's what team player meant, I didn't want to be one. She smiled slightly. Cost me a promotion. But watching you get this job instead, I think I made the right call. After she left, Michael sat in his office, still couldn't think of it as his office, not really, and reviewed the production schedules again. They were behind on the Nordic Trade Solutions order, not critically but enough to notice. The safety audits had found problems in 18 machines. Repairs were ongoing, but each repair meant downtime, and he still had to implement the wage increases, develop the safety training program, and figure out how to increase production capacity by 30% for next quarter. It was too much. Michael felt the pressure building behind his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. For a moment he let himself imagine what it would be like to quit, to walk away, go back to being a line supervisor where the problems were simpler and the responsibility lighter. Then he thought about Emily's face when that needle had nearly hit her, about Maria taking on extra work without complaint, about Dmitri working on a machine that could have caught fire. No, he couldn't walk away, but he also couldn't do this alone. Michael pulled out his phone and called Ingrid. She answered on the second ring. Michael, is something wrong? I need help. There was a pause. What kind of help? The kind where you teach me how to actually run a factory. Because right now, I'm drowning, and I'm about to take everyone down with me. I'll be there tomorrow morning, Ingrid said without hesitation. And Michael, asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. She arrived at 7 a.m. with a stack of binders and a tablet full of management software. Welcome to Factory Management 101, she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. We're going to start with production scheduling. Show me what you're working with. For the next 3 days, Ingrid essentially moved into Factory 4. She reviewed his systems, identified gaps, and taught him frameworks for decision-making he'd never learned as a line supervisor. You're thinking linearly, she explained, while reviewing his production plan. You see a problem, you apply a solution. But factory management is systems thinking. Every decision ripples out. Move workers from one line, it affects another. Shut down a machine for maintenance, it impacts supply chain timing. You need to think 3 steps ahead. How do you learn to do that? Experience, mostly, and mistakes. Ingrid smiled. Lots of mistakes. Let me tell you about the time I shut down an entire production facility in Sweden because I didn't understand their energy grid schedule. Cost us 200,000 euros and taught me to always check infrastructure dependencies first. Slowly, with Ingrid's guidance, Michael started to see the patterns. He learned to map out consequences before making changes. He learned which problems needed immediate attention and which could wait. He learned to delegate instead of trying to solve everything himself. By the end of the week, the production schedules were stabilizing. They weren't back to optimal yet, but they were trending the right direction. You're getting it, Ingrid said, reviewing his latest resource allocation plan. This is solid work. I couldn't have done it without you. No, you couldn't have, but you will be able to soon. That's the point of teaching. She closed her binder. I'm heading back to Stockholm tomorrow, but I'll be available by phone, and I'll visit monthly to check progress. Thank you for everything. Thank me by running this place the right way, by proving that ethical management can be profitable. Ingrid stood. And Michael, remember what I said. Asking for help isn't weakness. Don't try to do this alone. After she left, Michael stood at his office window, looking out at the factory floor. The machines hummed. The workers moved through their routines. Carlos was conducting his safety inspections. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't normal. It was better. Michael had made mistakes. He would make more, but he was learning. And more importantly, he had people willing to teach him, to support him, to tell him when he was about to screw up. That was worth more than any amount of natural talent. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Heard about your promotion. So proud of you. Love, Mom. Michael smiled. He still hadn't told her the full story of how he'd gotten this job. How he'd been fired and rehired in the same day. How he'd stood up to Richard and nearly lost everything. Maybe he'd tell her someday, or maybe some stories were better left as simple victories. Either way, he had work to do. Michael grabbed his tablet and headed out to the factory floor for his afternoon rounds. He had 70 workers depending on him to make the right calls. He had clients expecting quality and ethics. Near 70 workers in sakes. He had equipment to maintain and schedules to optimize. It was overwhelming, but it was also increasingly exactly where he wanted to be. 3 weeks into his tenure as factory director, Michael started noticing small problems. Finished garments showing up with defects that should have been caught in quality control. Shipments arriving late at the loading dock. Equipment that had been serviced suddenly showing errors again. Individually, each issue was minor. Collectively, they formed a pattern. Michael stood in the quality control area, holding a garment that had somehow passed inspection despite having clearly uneven stitching. How did this get through? The QC supervisor, a nervous man named Tony, wouldn't meet his eyes. I don't know, must have missed it. You've been doing this for 9 years, Tony. You don't miss things this obvious. People make mistakes. Yes, but this is the 4th one this week. Michael set the garment down. Talk to me. What's going on? Tony shifted uncomfortably. Nothing, just adjusting to the new systems. It was a lie. Michael could see it in the man's body language, hear it in his voice, but he couldn't prove it, and pushing harder would just make Tony defensive. All right, Michael said, but I need you to double-check everything. Our reputation depends on quality. After Tony left, Michael pulled the quality control logs for the past 3 weeks. The pattern was unmistakable. Defect rates had jumped from their normal 2% to nearly 8%. But the defects weren't random. They were concentrated in specific production runs, specific shipments. Someone was deliberately sabotaging quality control. Michael's first thought was that he'd been wrong about Tony. But further investigation showed the problem went deeper. Equipment that Carlos had certified as repaired was failing again, but in ways that suggested tampering rather than natural wear. Production schedules that Michael had carefully optimized were being quietly altered, creating bottlenecks. Someone inside the factory was working against him. The question was, who and why? The answer came 2 days later when Nordic Trade Solutions called with a complaint. Their latest shipment had arrived with a 30% defect rate. 30%. It was catastrophic. Michael immediately pulled the shipment records. The order had gone through final QC 3 days ago, certified by Tony. But when Michael checked the actual garments that had been flagged, he found something interesting. The defective items had been intentionally mixed into boxes of good product. Not randomly, deliberately. Someone had opened sealed boxes, added defective garments, and resealed them. This wasn't negligence. It was sabotage. Michael called an emergency meeting with his supervisors and key personnel. He laid out the evidence without accusation, watching faces carefully. Most people looked shocked, concerned, but a few, Tony, and 2 of Richard's former assistants, showed something else. Guilt, fear. It was hard to tell. I don't know who's doing this, Michael said, but I know it's happening, so I'm going to make this simple. If you have information about these quality issues, come talk to me. Privately. No questions asked, no retaliation. I just want it to stop. No one came forward.
2 days later, another shipment went out. Another complaint came in. Michael was in his office staring at the complaint email when Emily appeared in his doorway. She'd been working openly as Hendrik's daughter for the past 2 weeks, spending half her time on the factory floor and half in management training with Michael. You look terrible, she said bluntly. Thanks, I'm serious. When's the last time you slept? Michael couldn't remember. I'm fine. You're not fine. Someone's sabotaging the factory and you're taking it personally. It is personal. This is my responsibility. Emily sat down across from him. Can I tell you something I learned from my father? Sure, people resist change, especially change that threatens their position or comfort. She leaned forward. Richard had allies in this factory, people who benefited from his way of doing things. You came in and changed everything, made it better for most people. Yes, but not for everyone. Michael frowned. You think this is retaliation? I think someone wants you to fail. They want to prove that your way doesn't work, that Richard's approach was better. That's insane. Richard put people in danger. yes, but he also let certain people get away with things. Cutting corners, taking shortcuts, getting paid under the table for looking the other way. Emily's expression was grim. My father taught me that when you introduce ethical practices you threaten everyone who benefited from unethical ones. So what do? You catch them, you prove they're sabotaging the operation, and you remove them. Emily was right. Michael knew it. But catching whoever was doing this felt impossible when he couldn't even trust his own QC supervisor. Then he remembered something. The factory had security cameras. They covered the loading docks, the main floor, the QC area. Michael spent the next 6 hours reviewing footage. It was tedious work, watching endless loops of workers moving boxes, operating machinery, conducting inspections. But finally, at 2 a.m. he found it. Tony, the QC supervisor, opening sealed boxes in the loading area, carefully removing good garments and replacing them with defective ones he'd pulled from the reject bin, then resealing the boxes and marking them as approved for shipment. And he wasn't alone. 2 other workers, both former supervisors under Richard who'd been demoted when Michael restructured the management team, were helping him. Michael felt sick. These were people he'd tried to trust, people he'd given chances to. But he also felt relief. He had proof. He could stop this. The next morning, Michael called Hendrik Larsson directly. I found who's sabotaging the shipments, he said without preamble. I have video evidence, but I wanted to tell you personally before I act. Hendrik listened as Michael explained. Then he said, what do you plan to do? Fire them, all 3. Report them to the authorities if you want to press charges. Do you know why they did it? Michael hesitated. I think they wanted me to fail, to prove Richard's way was better. And do you think firing them will solve the problem? Less. Michael, let me tell you something about betrayal in business. It's rarely personal, even when it feels that way. These people didn't sabotage you because they hate you. They did it because they were scared. Scared of losing what little power or advantage they had. Scared of a system that demands integrity when they've built their careers on cutting corners. So I should just forgive them. No, you should remove them, but you should also understand them. Hendrik's voice was gentle but firm. And you should make sure everyone else in that factory understands that this was a choice those individuals made, not a reflection on your leadership. Michael absorbed that. You think people will blame me for this? Some might. Change is threatening, Michael. You've done good work, but that doesn't mean everyone supports it. Hendrik paused. Fire them, but do it right. Make it clear why. Make it a lesson, not just a punishment. Michael ended the call and summoned Tony and the other 2 to his office. He showed them the footage. Watched their faces go pale. I want to understand, he said. Why did you do this? Tony looked at the floor. You don't get it. Richard, he took care of us. We helped him keep things running smooth. He made sure we got bonuses, extra overtime, looked the other way when we needed breaks. So you sabotaged the company that employs you. We thought if you failed they'd bring Richard back. Things would go back to normal. Normal, Michael repeated. You mean where people got hurt because equipment wasn't maintained, where workers were afraid to report problems. That normal. One of the others, a man named Derek, finally met Michael's eyes. It wasn't all bad. Richard kept this place profitable. By cutting corners and putting people at risk. By doing what it took to survive. Michael felt his anger rising but forced it down. These men had made their choices. But they'd also been shaped by a system that rewarded shortcuts and punished speaking up. You're all fired, he said quietly. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't. I can. And I am. Michael stood. What you did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. I should report you to the authorities. The only reason I'm not is because I believe in giving people a chance to change, but that chance doesn't include working here. After they left escorted by security, Michael called a factory-wide meeting. He stood on the same workbench he'd stood on 3 weeks ago when he'd first become director. The same faces looked up at him, but now there was confusion and worry. By now you've all heard that Tony and 2 others were fired this morning. Michael began. I want you to understand why. He explained the sabotage, showed samples of the defective products that had been intentionally mixed into shipments, explained the damage it had done to their reputation with Nordic Trade Solutions. These 3 men made a choice, Michael said. They chose to undermine this factory because they wanted things to go back to how they were under Richard Brennan. They thought if they made me fail, the old system would return. He paused, looking out at the workers. But here's what they didn't understand. This isn't about me versus Richard. This isn't about old way versus new way. This is about whether we're the kind of workplace where people feel safe coming to work, where equipment gets maintained before it fails, where quality matters more than speed. Michael's voice grew stronger. Some of you miss how things were. I get that. Change is hard. The old system had benefits for some people. It let certain things slide. It rewarded loyalty over competence. It asked you to keep your heads down and not ask questions. But that system also hurt people. It put Emily in danger. It ran equipment until it broke. It valued targets over human beings. And I will not let it come back. He softened his tone. If you can't work in a system that demands integrity, I understand. I won't force you to stay. But if you choose to stay, I need your commitment. I need to know that you're with me, that you believe workers deserve safety, quality deserves attention, and people deserve respect. The factory floor was silent. Then slowly, people started nodding. Maria spoke up. We're with you, Michael. Most of us anyway. Others echoed her. Not everyone. A few workers looked uncomfortable, uncertain, but enough. Enough to know that the culture was shifting, slowly but surely. After the meeting, Emily found him in his office. That was good, she said. You didn't just punish them. You explained why. You gave people a choice. Your father's advice. Some of it, but mostly it was you. She smiled. You're learning. Michael looked at the production reports on his desk. They were still behind schedule. They'd lost 3 workers who, despite their sabotage, had been experienced and skilled. The repair costs for the damage they'd caused would hurt the budget. But the factory felt cleaner somehow, like an infection had been lanced. It's going to get harder before it gets easier, Emily said, reading his thoughts. I know, but you'll figure it out. You always do. Michael wasn't sure he believed that, but he appreciated her confidence, and he had work to do. The fallout from the sabotage continued for weeks. Nordic Trade Solutions, while understanding, demanded proof that the quality issues were resolved. That meant additional inspections, third-party audits, and closer oversight, all of which slowed production and added costs. Michael implemented new QC procedures, double checks on every shipment, random spot inspections, a complete overhaul of the quality control documentation system. It was exhausting, but slowly, gradually the defect rates began to fall, back to 3%, then 2%. Then in the 5th week after the firings, they hit 1.2%, the lowest in Factory 4's history. The Nordic Trade Solutions audit team noticed. We're impressed, the lead auditor told Michael during their final review. Not just with the quality improvements, but with how you've handled the crisis. A lot of directors would have tried to hide the sabotage, blame external factors. You owned it and fixed it. I didn't have much choice. You always have a choice. You chose transparency and accountability. That's rare. When the audit team left, they certified Factory 4 as meeting Nordic Trade Solutions' highest standards. It came with a commendation letter that Henrik Larsson personally called to discuss. You did well, Michael. Very well, thank you, sir. But we're still not back to full capacity. You will be, and when you are, we're going to trust you with something bigger. Henrik's tone shifted, becoming more serious. How would you feel about taking on production for our new sustainable textile line? It's a premium product with very exacting standards. Michael's heart rate picked up. That's a significant contract. Yes, but we believe you can handle it. More than that, we believe your factory embodies the values we want associated with that product line. It was an opportunity that could transform Factory 4's future. More work, better margins, higher profile. It was also terrifying. I'd be honored, Michael said. But I'll need to hire more workers, upgrade some equipment, possibly expand our floor space. Do what you need to do. Ingrid will work with you on the logistics. We're looking at a 9-month timeline for implementation. After the call, Michael sat in his office, staring at the ceiling. 9 months ago he'd been a line supervisor worried about making rent. Now he was planning a major expansion of a factory he'd barely learned to manage. Emily knocked on his door frame. I heard about the sustainable textile contract. Congratulations, thanks, I think. She laughed. You look more terrified than happy. Because I am. This is huge, Emily. If I screw this up, you won't. You don't know that. I do actually. Emily sat down. Can I tell you what my father said when I asked him why he trusted you with this contract? Please. He said you're the only factory director he's ever met who fired someone for doing exactly what most directors reward, prioritizing production over safety. He said that level of integrity is so rare it's worth investing in. Michael didn't know what to say. You stopped a machine to save a worker you'd known for 3 weeks. You got fired for it. And when you got a second chance, you didn't just go back to business as usual, you changed everything. You made it better. Emily's expression was earnest. That's not luck, Michael. That's character. And character doesn't fail under pressure. It shines. I'm still going to need help. Good thing you have it. Ingrid will be here next week to start planning, and I'm staying on for another 6 months to help with the transition. You were only supposed to be here 3 months total. Emily shrugged. I changed my mind. There's more to learn here than I expected, including from you. After she left, Michael pulled up the expansion plans and started making notes. More workers meant more hiring, more training, more infrastructure. New equipment meant capital investment, installation, testing. Bigger floor space meant negotiating with the building owners, possibly construction. It was overwhelming, but it was also exciting in a way he hadn't expected. 3 months ago he'd been fighting just to keep his head above water. Now he was planning to expand, to grow, to build something that mattered. His phone rang. His mother. Hi Mom. Michael, I just got your check. You sent too much again. He smiled. With his director salary and the bonuses from the Nordic contract, he'd been able to increase what he sent home. It's not too much. It's what you deserve. What I deserve is a son who takes care of himself. Are you eating, sleeping? Yes, Mom. Liar. I can hear it in your voice. You sound tired. I'm always tired lately. But it's good tired. I'm building something. His mother was quiet for a moment. Your father would be proud of you. You know that, right? Michael's throat tightened. I hope so. I know so. He always said you had a good heart, that you'd do something important someday. She paused. I think this is that someday, baby. After they hung up, Michael allowed himself a moment to feel the weight of those words. His father had died believing Michael would do something meaningful. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to. The next morning Michael arrived early to find Carlos already on the floor conducting his daily equipment checks. Morning, boss. Morning. Everything looking good. Better than good. You know station 14. The one with the cracked bearing. I installed the new motor yesterday. This baby's running smoother than it has in 5 years. Michael walked over to inspect the machine. Carlos was right. The vibration that had always been there, that subtle wrongness, was gone. It hummed quietly, efficiently. Nice work. Yeah, well, having time to do things right makes a difference. Carlos grinned. Richard used to yell at me for spending too long on maintenance. Said I was wasting company time. Good maintenance saves company time. Preach. Carlos moved to the next machine. You know what's funny? I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've worked under 6 different directors. You're the first one who actually listened when I said something needed fixing. That's insane. That's business. Most directors care about numbers on a spreadsheet. You care about the actual machines, the actual people. Carlos looked at him. Don't lose that, kid. That's what makes this place different. Michael thought about those words as he made his rounds. The factory did feel different now, not just in policy but in atmosphere. Workers smiled more, asked questions instead of staying silent, reported problems instead of hiding them. It wasn't perfect. They still had inefficiencies, still had workers who preferred the old way, still had challenges, but they were moving in the right direction. And that, Michael was learning, was all you could really ask for. 3 months later, Factory 4 was unrecognizable. Not physically, the brick walls and concrete floors remained the same. But the energy, the culture, the way people carried themselves had transformed. The sustainable textile line was in full production. Michael had hired 20 new workers, installed state-of-the-art equipment, and expanded into an adjacent building. The training program Ingrid had helped develop was producing skilled operators faster than he'd thought possible. And the numbers spoke for themselves. Production was up 35%. Quality defect rates had dropped to 0.8%. Worker satisfaction,
measured in anonymous surveys, had increased dramatically. Staff turnover, which had been at 40% under Richard, was now under 8%. Nordic Trade Solutions wasn't their only client anymore either. Word had spread about the factory that prioritized ethics without sacrificing quality. Other companies had reached out, wanting to partner with a facility that aligned with their values. Michael stood in his office. He could finally think of it as his office now, looking at the production floor through the glass wall. It was organized chaos, exactly as it should be. Workers moved with purpose. Machines hummed efficiently. The fear that had permeated every corner under Richard's leadership was gone. Emily appeared in the doorway. "Penny, for your thoughts, just reflecting. It's been quite a year." That's an understatement. She came to stand beside him, following his gaze. "You know what I think about when I look at this place." "What?" "That needle. The one that almost hit me." Emily touched her cheek unconsciously. "If you'd done what Richard wanted, if you'd put me back on that machine, I don't think it would have ended well. Something else would have broken. Someone would have gotten hurt. Maybe me, maybe someone else. You don't know that." "I do actually. Because I've seen what happens in factories that prioritize targets over people. I've done audits in 12 countries now, and I've seen the damage, the injuries, the burnout, the culture of fear." She turned to look at him. "What you built here is special, Michael. Don't ever forget that." There was a knock at the door. Maria poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but we've got the delegation from the Sustainability Conference here. They're ready for their tour." Michael straightened his tie. Over the past few months, Factory 4 had become something of a case study in ethical manufacturing. They'd hosted visitors from trade organizations, other factories, even a university research team studying workplace culture. "I'll be right there." The delegation was a group of 15 people: factory owners, consultants, industry analysts. Michael led them through the facility, explaining the changes he'd implemented, the challenges they'd faced, the results they'd achieved. One woman, a factory owner from California, pulled him aside during the tour. "Can I ask you something? How did you convince your ownership group to invest in all these changes? Better equipment, higher wages, all this training. That's a huge capital outlay." "I showed them the numbers," Michael said. "Lower turnover saves money. Better quality reduces waste. Happy workers are more productive. When you factor in all the costs of running a factory badly, running it well is actually cheaper." "But in the short term, there must have been resistance." "There was, but I had leverage. Nordic Trade Solutions made it clear they'd only continue partnering with us if we met their standards. The ownership group had to choose between short-term costs and long-term sustainability. And they chose sustainability. They chose not to lose their biggest client. The sustainability was a side effect." Michael smiled. "Though I think they've come to appreciate it on its own merits since then." After the delegation left, Michael returned to his office to find Henrik Larsson waiting for him. "Mr. Larsson, I didn't know you were visiting today. Surprise inspection." Henrik smiled. "Don't worry, you passed. As always." "Thank you, sir." Henrik settled into a chair, his expression turning serious. "I came to discuss something with you. Nordic Trade Solutions is expanding. We're opening a new manufacturing oversight division to help other factories implement the kind of changes you've made here. That's excellent news. We want you to head it." Michael's mind went blank. "I'm sorry, what?" "We want to promote you. Move you to our headquarters in Stockholm. Give you a team and a budget to travel the world, consulting with factories, teaching them what you've learned here." It was an incredible opportunity. More money, more influence, a chance to make an impact beyond just Factory 4. Michael struggled to find words. "I'm honored. But this factory would be in excellent hands. We'd promote Emily to director. She's learned from you, she knows the operation, and she's ready." Michael looked at Emily, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner. She nodded. "It's true, I'm ready, and you've taught me well. This feels sudden." Henrik leaned forward. "Michael, you've proven something important here. You've proven that you can take a failing factory and transform it through ethical leadership. That's a skill we need to spread. Think about it. Instead of helping 70 workers, you could help thousands, tens of thousands. But these 70 workers are my responsibility. and you've built a system that doesn't depend on you personally. That's the mark of good leadership, making yourself replaceable. Henrik smiled gently. You can't stay here forever, Michael. At some point you have to trust others to carry on your work. Michael walked to the window, looking out at the factory floor one more time. He saw Dmitri at Station 14, the machine that had almost caught fire now running perfectly. He saw Maria supervising her line with the confidence he'd helped her build. He saw workers who no longer looked afraid. Can I think about it? Of course. Take a week. Talk to your team. Talk to your mother. Make the choice that's right for you. After Henrik left, Emily came to stand beside Michael. You should take it, she said quietly. I haven't decided yet. I know, but you should take it. She touched his arm. Michael, you changed this place. You saved lives, mine included. But you've also created something that can sustain itself. That's the whole point, isn't it? To build something good that outlasts you. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that kind of role. Emily laughed. You weren't qualified to be factory director either. That didn't stop you. And look what you built. She was right. Michael knew she was right, but leaving still felt like abandoning something precious. Over the next week, Michael consulted everyone he trusted. His supervisors all agreed he should take the opportunity. His mother cried with pride, and told him his father would have wanted this for him. Even Carlos, the maintenance tech who'd become an unexpected friend, pushed him to go. You've taught me what good leadership looks like, Carlos said during their final conversation. Now go teach other people. Let us show you we can keep this place running the way you built it. On the 7th day, Michael called Henrik. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Name them. First, I want to stay involved with Factory 4. Monthly check-ins, quarterly visits. I need to know it's still being run right. Agreed. Second, any factory I work with needs to commit to the same standards we implement here. I won't help companies that just want to look ethical without actually changing. Also agreed. Anything else? Michael thought about it. Yeah, I want Emily to succeed. Not because of her last name, but because she's earned it. Promise me you'll give her the same chance to prove herself that you gave me. Michael, Henrik said, his voice warm, she already has that chance. She earned it the same way you did, by doing the right thing when it was hard. 2 months later, Michael stood in the Factory 4 parking lot, for the last time as director. His office had been emptied, his files transferred. Emily was already settling into the role, implementing her own ideas while maintaining the systems Michael had built. The workers had thrown him a going-away party the night before. There had been speeches and a cake and a plaque that read to the director who remembered we're people first. Michael had tried not to cry, and failed completely. Now in the quiet of early morning before the first shift arrived, he looked at the brick building that had been his whole world for 8 years. Line supervisor, then director. Now, something else, something bigger. His phone buzzed. A text from Ingrid, who was picking him up for the flight to Stockholm. Ready for your new adventure. Michael looked at the factory one more time. Thought about Emily and Maria and Carlos and Dmitri and all the others who would continue the work. Thought about the needle that had almost changed everything. Thought about the choice he'd made to put people first, and all the consequences that had flowed from that single moment. He typed back, ready. Then he got in the car, and he drove toward the future. Not away from what he'd built, but towards something larger. A chance to spread the lessons he'd learned, to help other workers and other factories feel safe and valued and heard. It wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And Michael Santos, who'd been a line supervisor willing to lose everything for a principle, was ready to see where that principle could take him next.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.